Welcome to Prepper Dan's SHTF radio network. Created by Boyd Craven Jr., presented by Raventhorn Books. Written by Boyd Craven Jr., with L.A. Bales and Mark Loren. On October 28, at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, a coordinated attack involving 3 nuclear warheads detonated simultaneously at an altitude of 200 miles above North America. One warhead exploded in the center, while the other 2 were detonated 100 miles inland from the east and west coasts. The EMPs generated by the explosions destroyed the circuitry of all satellites in line of sight, as well as the communications and instrumentation of aircraft and the power grids and technology containing computer chips in most states. Only Hawaii, Alaska, the southern tip of Florida, and parts of Texas with independent power grids were spared from damage, with the Midwest states experiencing less damage than the coasts. Chapter 1. Thursday, October 27. The camera was ready and focused on Dan, who sat in his usual spot behind the middle of the 10-foot pine plank table stained with a dull, mossy oak-type finish. His left hand held the arm of the black microphone boom, his right the microphone itself, while he grinned with his usual slanted smile at Allison. He tilted his head back and flared his nostrils at her, then bared his teeth as big as he could. "They clean?" She shook her head ever so slightly and chuckled, "Gross. I can never unsee that, you dork." "Yes. You're fine. Ready? In 3, 2. She held up one finger, then folded it and hit the button. The tiny green LED lights on the camera and the mic lit up simultaneously. Looking right at her, as was his habit, Dan began talking. "Yesterday, our time, North Korea's naval forces did something so incredibly stupid, it kind of defied logic. We don't have much on it yet, as this is just breaking news to us, but we're gonna touch on it, what it might mean, and why it could be important to you. We'll get into that, but before we do, my friends, don't forget to go over to prepperdansbugin.com and click Join Us, to become a member and support our work directly. Hit that like button, comment below, and share the show with your friends so YouTube will suggest us to even more people, and we can grow from 12-minute shows to 24 and bring on more experts who aren't afraid to tell you the way it is." He rolled backward in his chair and stood, turning to the enormous world map they'd hung on the paneled wall behind him. They'd practiced this move, so Allison had no trouble framing him in the camera as he gestured to the South China Sea region with his right index finger. She zoomed in slightly for emphasis. "It's no surprise to anyone who's been listening to us lately that the Chinese have been building up their naval capabilities in a huge way and are pushing outward in every direction. Well, part of our Pacific Fleet has been maneuvering there in the South China Sea, projecting force around the contested island of Taiwan and patrolling the area of the Senkaku Island chain in the East China Sea claimed by Japan, while a huge landing exercise was taking place to enforce that. China was probably unhappy about that and was crowding closer than ever. Not to be outdone, North Korea's navy, such as it is, pressed in even closer, then went a little crazy and wound up actually firing missiles and torpedoes at American ships. Needless to say, North Korea no longer has much of a surface fleet. Their numerous submarines, however, were nowhere to be seen. Instead of assisting their allies as expected, China's entire fleet turned away at full speed. It makes you wonder why. Are they going to try taking a swipe at Manila or Tokyo? Maybe even Hawaii? Or were they just ensuring we knew they had no part in what North Korea did? Time will tell. What do you think, Tim?" Allison flicked the focus to the camera and mic in front of Tim, seated at Dan's far left side. "None of those options make any sense to me, Dan. They're too close to our Pacific Fleet to try the first 2, and we've got enough firepower at Pearl to keep them off there easily. My guess is, like you said, they're throwing North Korea under the bus and saying, hey, we had nothing to do with that. What I'd really like to know is, where were all of North Korea's submarines? And what are we doing about the missiles they fired from their mainland? I know our guys pounded holes in at least one NK frigate until it sank and made floating junk out of everything else they had out there, but did they erase those launch sites on North Korea's mainland from the map permanently? Actually, look what I just found on that." Allison said excitedly and switched focus to monitor number 1 in front of her. It showed a video released earlier by the BBC of an after-dark strike the night before by a tremendous number of what appeared to be cruise missiles coming in at an arc from the Sea of Japan and annihilating everything in the picture for as far as the camera covered. It went on for several minutes. When they quit coming, all that could be seen was smoke, fire, and rubble, where a large NK military base had stood minutes before. Dan whistled softly. The camera angle on that was from quite a ways away and pretty high up. It must have been taken by a drone over South Korea, or maybe one of those low-orbit satellites, if they can zoom in that close. That would be my guess, Tim added. Our guys would be the only ones who could have done that and known it was coming. They probably captured it and leaked it immediately to a neutral party to report. Allison zoomed in on Dan's face as he shook his head. Well, that'll learn them. One of these days, those knuckleheads are gonna push their luck too far, and we'll have World War III on our hands. There's another theory floating around out there that the Chinese will bluff a run at Hawaii in order to pull our ships off of protecting our interests in the China Sea so they and the North Koreans can zoom in and overrun them. Maybe what we just saw was also meant to prevent them from taking part in any such shenanigans? Here's something else that just occurred to me. I want you listeners out there to remember just how much of our food, fuel, and supplies come through the seaports of the West Coast. If our supply chain in the Pacific was ever interrupted for any reason, within days, we'd start seeing empty shelves in grocery stores in a wave stretching from west to east across the United States. Not everything, mind you, but we've all experienced panic buying. Remember the great toilet paper debacle? It took most of a year to get that mess all straightened out. That could also be their game. Toilet paper wars? Tim snickered. Dan rolled his eyes. That brings us to the second part of our show, Prepper Dan's Bug-In, where we talk about critical preparedness topics for any such unfortunate event causing us to hunker down in place to wait for the dust to settle. We've been bringing you bits and pieces on this segment from our upcoming book, Food for a Year, for a while now. Tonight, we're going to introduce you to our friend and neighbor, Amber Bradshaw, from myhomesteadlife.com. Allison flicked the focus to monitor number 1, where a picture of a man with a long beard wearing denim bib overalls and a woman standing next to him in a forest came into view. Her voice said, "Hey, y'all. We're Timmy and Amber Bradshaw, parents of 3, author, homesteader, DIYer, teacher, TV talent, blogger, and live off-grid by the Smoky Mountains. We strive to be self-sufficient and to teach others to do the same. Here, you'll find ways to enjoy your life more by living off the land. From homemade remedies to livestock care, be inspired here." Dan read from a list. They've been featured on History Channel, Discovery Channel, Discovery Plus, NBC News, Newport Plain Talk News, HGTV, DIY Network, Homestead Rescue, Building Off the Grid, Forbes Magazine, and several others. You can check their website for links to all of them. On very short notice, I asked Amber to talk tonight about one of the many valuable topics she explains freely on her website. It really is a treasure trove of off-grid information, and every one of you listening should go check it out. As always, I'll post the links in the description below the video. Amber, I'm almost embarrassed to ask, after Tim's toilet paper wars joke, can you give us the gist of your article? Oh no. There's no toilet paper. 5 toilet paper alternatives. But before she does, I want to explain that we only have Amber's voice for you, no video on her side, because her family truly does live off-grid in the mountains 365 days a year, and they don't have the bandwidth to do video. She's on her cell phone. Go ahead, my friend. Thanks for having me, Dan. Yeah, folks, never in a million years would I have thought I'd live to see the day when security had to guard the toilet paper aisles in stores because people were wiping the shelves clean. But I did, and you probably did, too, not so long ago. Listening to what these 3 talked about before I came on, I suppose it's possible that we might see something like that again. That's right, we live in a day and time when there could be another toilet paper shortage, where there's not a square to spare. Desperate times can call for desperate measures, but don't panic, we have 5 alternatives for you to use. Imagine something happened, who knows what, but store shelves across the United States have become bare once again as customers started hoarding supplies out of fear and greed. Toilet paper can become worth its weight in gold suddenly. Stores could start limiting the amount customers could purchase, and violence would be witnessed in some cases over the paper we use to wipe our butts. I kid you not. I can honestly say I may have been in the same situation had we never moved off the grid because of living through hurricanes on the coast for the last 22 years. Don't get me wrong, we still use the fluffy white stuff on rolls today, however, we will never again be panicked by empty Charmin shelves. We know of alternatives that are very doable in the time of need, she grinned. There was a collective groan from Dan, Tim, and Allison. I almost hate to ask what they are, but go ahead, Dan said. Amber chuckled. You guys are spoiled. You live in luxury compared to us. I've been to your place. But your audience wants to know, how can I poop without toilet paper? A louder groan came from Allison. You could hear the amusement in Amber's voice. First, don't panic. You can still get your bum clean. Toilet paper wasn't invented until 1857, and I promise you that people were pooping way before that and survived. Even if you've hoarded tons of toilet paper, eventually, you'll run out. Then what? It's a great idea to familiarize yourself with tissue paper alternatives. Can you make your own toilet paper? The answer is yes and no. You could make your own as long as you had the materials. However, it's a very laborious process. Since there are easier and faster alternatives, would opt for one or more of the suggestions I'm about to offer. What can you use if you run out of toilet paper? I'm glad you asked. There are several options, all of which are very doable. Once you've tried them, you may make a permanent switch. Oh, I doubt that. Allison giggled. According to Consumer Reports, the average American spends over $122 per year on toilet paper. Forget about shortages, look at all the money you'd save by switching to TP alternatives. I think it's an excellent investment, Allison whispered. Dan shushed her and rolled his eyes at her good-naturedly. Amber continued, can you use baby wipes instead of toilet paper? The answer is yes. However, please, for the love of all things plumbing, don't flush the wipes down the toilet. Plumbers everywhere will thank you. You can make your own natural baby wipes. Green Child magazine shares their easy cloth and disposable DIY baby wipe instructions. If I were to add anything to their instructions, it would be 4 drops of lavender essential oil. There are leaves you can use for toilet paper. Remember when we were kids and made forts out in the woods? Do you remember getting poison ivy in places you shouldn't have? Yeah, not fun at all. You don't want that on your butt during an emergency or any other time. Here's the good news that can bring back some memories without all of the itching. There are leaves that'll work great in a pinch to help wipe down under. However, before pulling an Adam and Eve, ensure you can correctly identify the plant you are about to wipe your tush with. When choosing the best leaves, look for large leaves free from bugs, thorns, and debris. Perform a skin test by rubbing it on the backside of your wrist and waiting several hours to check for sensitivity. You can use mullein, Verbascum thapsus, for toilet paper. Also called cowboy toilet paper, mullein has been used for years, way before the invention of Angel Soft. One pro tip is to use the leaf with the delicate soft hairs on the leaves going in the same direction you are wiping, not against the grain. Mullein grows nearly everywhere, and there's plenty for everyone. One can also use lamb's ear, Stachys byzantina, for toilet paper. It's also known as woolly hedge nettle, woolly betony, and donkey's ear. Lamb's ear has a very soft, velvety leaf that feels soothing against the skin. It's also great for herbal medicine. Luckily, lamb's ear grows in every region of the United States, so it's readily available whenever nature calls. Besides mullein and lamb's ear, other natural TP options are broadleaf plantain, large-leaf aster, cottonwood leaves, thimbleberry leaves, and corn lily. A more civilized approach, though, would be the family cloth. She couldn't see it, but Dan and Allison shared a horrified look that lingered on their faces as Amber continued. The family cloth works pretty much like cloth diapers. Families all over the country may turn to the family cloth if the store shelves ever run empty again. In fact, a good supply of store-bought ones should be included in everyone listening's preps. Here's how to use the family cloth. Lightly wet one half of it, so it's damp, not soaking. Wipe with the wet side, flip the cloth, and dry with the other side. Place the used cloth in a wash bag. When it's time, just wash them in super hot water with detergent, rinse, and hang to dry. Allison focused the camera on Tim, who had been quiet. His eyes looked pained, and he was doing a full-body cringe. He was unaware. Then there's the DIY bidet. Actually, the DIY bidet and the family cloth go hand in hand, or more like hand and tushy. Get you a sports bottle, like the ones football players use with the long curved straw. Fill it with purified water, warm water is even better, and clean that hind end before using a cloth to pat it dry. You'll seriously wonder why you ever paid a small fortune all these years on paper you just flush. Make sure you use a new water bottle and have it dedicated for bathroom use only. Because, corn cobs in place of toilet paper. When my husband was growing up, his mama and papa lived in the country. The back country. They had oil lanterns, newspapers in their walls for insulation, and a bucket full of corn cobs in the outhouse. Of course, this was after the cobs had been shucked. Shucked, dry corn cobs make an all-natural, biodegradable alternative and are surprisingly soft on delicate areas. Each cob is for a one-time use only. They say that desperation is the mother of all invention, and I have to admit, we all could very well find ourselves in desperate times again one day. I firmly believe if we can let go of thinking about how things are supposed to be and start thinking about what can work, we'll be able to overcome any obstacle. There was a slightly longer pause when Amber finished than planned before Dan said, "Well, thank you for that information." Amber. "I think. Any time, Dan," she chuckled. Well, that's about it for tonight's show. Keep your eyes wide open, America. A lot of the world loves to hate us and wishes us harm. Be prepared, don't be a victim. And remember, if SHTF for any reason or if we get censored right off the air, you'll be able to find us on SHTF radio on 14.242 MHz USB on the same days and times. Good night. Oh, my God. That was totally cringe-worthy. Allison's daughter croaked out from her seat by the door behind them after the mics were all off.